Blessings, everybody. This is Dale. Thank you so much for joining with me today on the Word Podcast. We are in Acts 17 now, looking at the life of Paul. And again, like I've said many times before, just sort of setting us up for going into Colossians. As a matter of fact, we've started preaching through Colossians here the last day or two. And so we'll start looking at Colossians within the next week, probably next few days. I just want to see a few more of these episodes from Paul's life because they teach us so many things. And remember, Paul's the one who wrote the letter to the believers in Colossae. So here, Acts 17, verse 1, listen to this. Now, when they had passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where there was a synagogue of the Jews. So we'd seen Paul in Philippi. We saw he and Silas had gotten beaten. They were put in jail. We saw that happen to them. They let them go. Actually, the powers that be escorted them to the city limits and sent them on their way. They went and spent some time in Lydia, just a little bit of time, encouraged brethren. Then they kept pressing on. So now they come to Thessalonica. I think they're still bearing the evidences that they had been beaten. It takes bruises and bloodletting, a while to go down, right? Well, they come into Thessalonica, and there was a synagogue. And Paul went in, verse 2, as was his custom. That's the reason we can say this was the custom. This is what Paul did. He would come into town, he'd go to the synagogue, and he'd start sharing with those that were Jewish and with the Greek God-fearers. And on 3 Sabbath days, he reasoned with them from the Scriptures. So he went in and shared with them on 3 Sabbath days. Now, that's our Saturday. So 3 Saturdays in a row. And it's important because it's in the Scripture, but it gives us some insight and some things as we will see right here, but also when you read 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. See, Paul wrote back to these folks in Thessalonica. And when you realize, I'll just say what happens. He gets run out of town. After this 3rd Sabbath day, he has to leave. We're about to see, okay? So he could have been there just a day or two over 2 weeks. 2 or 3 weeks he was there. And when you see what he says in 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, it's amazing what he shared with those who are believers. Now here he's reasoning with them from the Scriptures. This is in the synagogue. And here's what he's doing in verse 3. Explaining and proving that it was necessary for the Christ to suffer and to rise from the dead. So he's explaining from the Scriptures. And the Scriptures refer to the Old Testament. That's what they had there. He's from the Old Testament that it was necessary for the Christ, for the Messiah to suffer. And it was necessary for him to rise from the dead. See, most believers, New Covenant believers, don't know that. They don't know that the Old Testament teaches that and gives insight into that. And if you're speaking with somebody that's got a Jewish background, don't take them to the New Testament first. Take them to the Old Testament. Take them to the Scriptures. And here's what he said. This Jesus whom I proclaim to you is the Christ. So he shared with them from the Scripture. He's explaining, proving that it was necessary for Christ to suffer, proving that it's necessary for the Christ to rise from the dead. And he says, you know what? This Jesus I'm telling you about, he's the Christ because he suffered and he rose from the dead. Verse 4, and some of them were persuaded and joined Paul and Silas, as did a great many of the devout Greeks, and not a few of the leading women. I always get a kick out of that because that's mentioned many, many times in Scripture about the prominent women, about the leading women. What made them leading? What made them prominent? Well, the mamas, all right? The fact that it's the same thing we see in society today. Sometimes we think, well, the women didn't do anything back in the Scriptures. Are you kidding me? Pay attention. What's going on here? It's wild, okay? So they were persuaded, many of them, okay? The devout Greeks, these are the ones that were the God-fearers, that feared the Most High God and would come to the Sabbath gatherings of the Jews, and they would stand usually on the second floor behind the lattice, okay? And then a lot of the Jewish prominent women believed. Verse 5, you know what the first word's going to be? But the Jews were jealous. The Jews, well, wait a minute, I thought some of the Jews were being saved. Well, some of the Jews were believing. When it says the Jews like this, it usually means the Jewish leadership. They were jealous. Jealous of what? Well, jealous of Jesus. Jealous of the proof that's being manifested here through Paul. Jealous of the fact that people were responding to what Paul was saying. They were responding to the gospel. They were jealous. So what'd they do? Did they try to come back and prove Paul wrong, that he was misinterpreting the Scripture? Oh, no. They wouldn't do that. Here's what they did. And taken some wicked men of the rabble. Don't you love it? Of the rabble. The wicked men from the marketplace. The King James calls them certain lewd fellows of the baser sort. Man, you got to love that. I mean, we just love that English, right? Certain lewd fellows of the baser sort. They took them and they formed a mob. Well, they did a rent-a-mob thing. That's what jealous leadership always does. You see it today in the political shenanigans in the United States. I mean, it's very, very obvious if you will look. If you will set aside your preconceived ideas, if you will set aside what you think you like and whose side you think you are, if you will just look, you will see that jealous people will get certain lewd fellows of a baser sort, and they will rent them as a mob. And here's what verse 17 says. They formed a mob, they set the city in an uproar, and attacked the house of Jason, seeking to bring them out to the crowds. So Paul, Silas, and his entourage, they were staying at the house of Jason. Jason had believed. Jason was a key leader within the Jewish synagogue, by the way, okay? And which made it even more disruptive. So they come and they set the city in uproar. Again, folks, it's the same strategy that we see today in so many things. Satan is powerful. He thinks he's creative, but he's not. He simply replicates the same thing over and over and over again. So they go in there and try to get them, but guess what? They weren't there. Verse 6. And when they could not find them, they dragged Jason and some of the brothers before the city authorities, shouting. So they couldn't find Paul and Silas, so they grabbed Jason and some of the other people who would believe, and they took them before the powers that be. Now listen to what they were shouting to the city authorities. I love this. I love this. Here's what they were saying. These men who have turned the world upside down have come here also, and Jason has received them, and they are all acting against the decrees of Caesar, saying that there is another king, Jesus. See, they heard the message, but they twisted the message to their benefit. They thought the only way that we're going to get anything behind this is if we can falsely accuse them. So they falsely accused them of saying that Jesus is the king, is the Caesar, and he usurps the Roman Caesar. That's not at all what they were saying in the gospel message. But I love that phrase, these men who have turned the world upside down have come here also. Folks, that is literally our calling in the kingdom, are to be the men and the women that will turn the world upside down. Okay? Not in the way that the world expects it. Not at all. No. But from a kingdom power perspective, we are literally those that turn the world upside down and turn people to the kingdom. Verse 8. And the people and the city authorities were disturbed when they heard these things and these accusations. So verse 9, and when they had taken money as security from Jason and the rest, they let them go. So they made them put up bond. They made them put up a pledge. Well, a pledge for what? I think we may get a hint in the next verse, verse 10. The brothers immediately sent Paul and Silas away by night to Berea, and when they arrived, they went into the Jewish synagogue. I'm thinking they put up money and made them pledge that they would bring Paul and Silas to them. If you'll do that, I'll let you go. What did they do? They did not do that. They got them out of town. And Jason and the rest lost their money. Yeah, it doesn't say that forthrightly, but I have a feeling that may be what happened right there. Otherwise, what's the point of the pledge? But they did get Paul and Silas out of town, and they went to Berea and arrived there, and they went to the Jewish synagogue. Well, my time's up. We'll get to this next episode next time. I'll see you then. Goodbye.